The following edition of Dialogue with Divinity was recorded from a previously live broadcast with the Community Listening Network. Welcome to another edition of Johanna Carroll's Dialogue with Divinity. And in today's session, our topic will be Metaphysics and Men. We will be taking your calls during this broadcast, so you can reach us here at the studio at area code 646-478-3549. And now we bring you our hosts, international intuitive and spiritual teacher, Johanna Carroll.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Oh, Gary, this should be an interesting show. I'll tell you why I wanted to do this. You know, I always have a reason. We're doing our Soulful Living series this year, which is really intended to help a lot of people. The reason I wanted to do this, I remembered a couple of years ago, well, more than a few years ago, every year I would do an annual retreat in Sedona. And this woman came in. I'd never met her before, and she was a little kind of nervous. And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "You know, my husband is so worried that when I go home I'm going to ask for a divorce." And I was like, "Because you're at a spiritual retreat?" And you know, I think for women, from the female perspective, when a woman, particularly she's been in a relationship for a while, and all of a sudden she decides she's going to go on this new journey, and maybe she didn't exactly invite him to go along, at the same time, there's a little bit of a that happens, and people get, the woman herself thought, well, maybe I am going to go home and ask for a divorce. And I said, why don't we look at it this way? What if you go home and fall in love in a whole new way? What if you go home and that relationship is more juicy and yummy and loving and sweet than it's ever been? What if there's a renewal of love? Because you've taken a look at an aspect of yourself. To me, someone who's on a spiritual journey really has to approach it from taking a look at what is working in your life and, what you can take and enhance and improve. Make it better. But it doesn't mean you're going to dump everyone in your life. That being said, Gary, there are a lot of people that think, they're not on the same path with me. We don't speak the same language anymore. So it's sort of that all or nothing consciousness. And metaphysics, first of all, meta is a Greek word that means beyond. So metaphysics is beyond the physical. And I do believe, certainly from my clients from the last 30 years, both male and female, that there are lots of people that tap into that awareness in their own unique way. And I think women need to kind of give men a break. And I think men are really trying to understand, this whole feminine mystique, as we called it back in the day. And yet I really do feel that now it's a great opportunity for the spiritual brotherhood and sisterhood to come together and realize, look, we're all unique, different souls on the earth living our lives the best way we possibly can. And yet I do think that there is a desire to have some depth in relationship and depth in conversation. I don't say that, every time you're together you're going to sit down and have this huge metaphysical dialogue going on. But I think it also represents, at some level, being on the same wavelength, even if it's as simple as spiritually there is a belief in a higher power. I think it's a starting point. So I wanted to do Metaphysics and Men because I think men need more attention in this crazy world that we're living on. I think women on some level kind of need to give the guys a break. They are doing the best they are. This is called the age of the divine feminine. But there's also a masculine component, too. We have both of those that exist within ourselves. And so how do we balance it within ourselves first? How do we live it out in the world? And how does it work in our relationships? So this is why I really wanted to do Metaphysics and Men. So when I say metaphysics to you, Gary, what does that really mean for you?
For me, metaphysics, I mean, well, first off, it means anything pertaining to spirituality. That's first and foremost. And then it gets into metaphysical sciences. Sciences, what some people refer to as pseudoscience. I mean, over the years in my experience and in my study, I've come to differ with that because I don't think it's pseudoscience. I think it really is science of which people have been familiar with for thousands of years. But, in our contemporary society, we have wished to ignore and not give much attention to.
I think that science is sort of catching up with spirituality. I mean, the ancient rishis in India were teaching a lot of the laws of quantum physics. They probably didn't call it that. But
correct, exactly.
They were, it's the laws of energy. Everything is energy. So I really feel that they were teaching that, thousands of years ago. Science always looks for empirical, they want proof. I understand that. But do all men really want that proof? Because, I'll tell you, with my male clients, I really do feel they're very spiritually connected. They just use different language than some people. So, they could be on a golf course having a great spiritual moment. To me, it's connecting. We all do that our unique way. So do you think it has to be so heavy with, the whole, let's talk about the science of the quantum field, and, what about just living it in your ordinary life?
Well, that was the second part of my answer, which is makes it really a lot important in terms of how I practice it and how I how I reflect upon it. Because to me, metaphysics plays a role in a lot of things, a lot of different aspects and facets of our life. And again, it really helps you in terms of, from a spiritual standpoint, it not only helps you, but gives you the tools in order to, make progress in your life. So it's, to me, it means a lot. Metaphysics has come to mean a lot. I'm not going to say and disillusion anybody that it always has, but it has come to mean a lot in my life. And I have to say that you've played a great role in helping me get a better handle on it. And then, on the tongue-in-cheek side, when I think of metaphysics, I also think of my favorite show of all time, which is The X-Files.
Yeah,
so that's in a nutshell.
Yeah, that was a great show. You used a very interesting word. You used the word practice. And so, to me, practicing something is I've got to get better at it. But I also feel in the Aquarian age that we're living in right now, it's taking what we know and living it. So I asked my husband before I went on the air, he's shy, he doesn't like to call in. I said, what does that really mean to you? I mean, he's a guy, He said it's living it at your core. Living it at your core. And, so what does living it at your core mean? That was my next question. Well, what the heck does that mean? It's the core of who you are. And you don't have to go out with any great bravado, waving a flag and talking about it. However, in the metaphysical community, as you know, it's really interesting because if you look at the leaders of light, if you will, a lot of them are men. And so that kind of, I'm not saying that I don't think it's a good idea, but, I'd like to see more women, rising to the top. It's interesting, though, because a lot of people, I would say maybe the majority of people who are consciously, okay, I'm on this spiritual journey, I'm on a quest, et cetera, that are seeking, I would say the majority of them are women. I mean, my 30 years of counseling, I would say the majority of my clients are female, but yet there is a large portion of men. They're very unique, and yet I think they're just regular guys like my husband who don't talk about it a lot. There's not this big bravado. But I do want to talk about, the people, the superstars that are out there, without naming any names, that the women are drawn to. We sort of talked about this before. When you are falling in love with that energy of that profound person who's very well known internationally, and there's a whole handful of these guys, I think what women particularly need to remember is don't get mesmerized by the man, but get mesmerized by the message. So he's just a messenger. And yet we hold these guys up at a very, very high level. And so here's something, without, again, naming any names, that has bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's just somebody, we have the human side of us, we have the spiritual side of us. We have the imperfect side of us, and we have the perfect side of us. It is really the divine marriage on some level. So how can you write a book and go around the world preaching about prosperity and abundance and all of that? And this is the weirdest thing, and I'm not even going to tell you where it is because I don't want to get nailed for this, but so this one particular man, who's in that genre, extremely famous, and lives sort of in the area that I'm in, happens to go to a beauty salon where one of my friends works.
Mm-hmm.
And she said he never, ever, 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 ever leaves a tip. And I'm like, are you serious? So for her, it's like, I'm not going to read his books, and I'm not going to listen to what he's saying because I'm looking at how he's living his life.
Wow.
Now, does that make him less of a teacher? I don't think it makes him less of a teacher.
But Johanna, I got to interject. Your life is your book.
Yeah.
And if people are going to read, and again, you saw her response and how she reacted, and that said she's not going to read a book. If you want people to really listen to your message, you have to start being the message, because that's how people really get a full grasp of the message. They have to buy into you. I used to train my managers in that a lot in terms. I said, if you really want to be an effective manager and instruct your people and get the respect out of your staff, they have to buy into you. They have to believe in you. So, I had to say that because I feel strongly about it.
But here's the thing. Do you think that people that are out there in the world, preaching, teaching, whatever, do they have a responsibility to live at a different standard? Is it even realistic? First of all, this was not a one-time event for this guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a continuum. And so that really kind of bothered me. It's like, are you serious? That's so hypocritical. But, who am I to judge? But yet, it is true, living your life. But people, the average person that, are putting this guy on a pedestal aren't really seeing that. So I really feel that whoever is out there giving a voice to and in service to the universe, because, none of this belongs to any of us. It belongs to the universe. We're just a messenger. We're a vehicle. Does that male person, and that little word that we talk about all the time, ego, edging God out, does it get in the way? So how do men deal with that? Because I think, first of all, ego is not necessarily a bad thing. If you're egocentric, it is. If you're narcissistic, it is. If it's your identity is, the be-all and the end-all, then there's a little problem there. But the reality is, our ego tells us a lot about who we are. It's not necessarily such a bad thing. It's what we're doing with it. So, as a man, listening to what I'm saying right now, and I don't want to judge this particular person, do the male teachers that are out there, because there are more male teachers in a presence than women. There are. Do they have a responsibility as a man to these metaphysical teachings, besides what we've already talked about?
Well, the old saying goes, to much is given, much is required. And another thing that has to be taken in consideration in this scenario is that, and this is something that we also talk about. Athletes talk about it. Other leaders talk about it. When you're in the public and you're out there on display, so to speak, that's when you have to definitely rise to the occasion.
That's true.
He's in a public place, getting service where the public gets the same service. So this is an opportunity, and yes, there is a responsibility when you're in a public situation, when you're on display, and when you are visible, to rise to the occasion. And if you consistently fall, then that's a whole
problem.
Exactly.
Yeah,
a
lot of the athletes, I was dealing with, I had a client once, great guy, I really liked him. He was, big basketball superstar. And man, he fell from grace really quickly. And it was hard for him because, from the time he was a teenager in high school, this kid was a superstar, and he rose like the cream. He rose really, quickly to the top of his field. But he fell and here's the thing, he didn't have anything to grab onto. So, he was raised with the religion, but his religion became the basketball court and his coach and women coming on to him. And, he reached a point in his career that was interesting. He said, there was a part of him that was actually very innocent. And he said to me, I don't know if these women are with me because they really like me, or it's the status, or it's the money. So the fact, first of all, that he was even asking the question was really, he just opened the door to his own metaphysical mystery on some level. And I have to say that even when he didn't get his contract renewed, and now he's out in the world having to live a quasi-normal life, at least he had some tools. But I'll tell you one thing I loved about him, and this is something that my younger son lived in a Buddhist monastery for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to me one day, Mom, you know what? You do have a gift, but you have to be humble, because that gift can be taken away at any time if you don't remember your own humility.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
I thought that was really something, and it does go back to the ego, and I don't care if you're a man or a woman, none of this belongs to us. I mean, we have a wonderful opportunity to be, a messenger and a voice to awaken that spiritual awareness at a whole new level in someone's life. We're all quote-unquote healers. Every single person, just smiling at someone, just being kind to another person. And I know, the world is an interesting place right now. There's a lot of, fear and love sort of cohabitating on the earth right now, but this whole concept of being humble. So I think that you told me that we do have someone from Canada that's on the line. Is that correct?
Yes. We have
Would they
two
like
calls.
to come on and have a little chat?
Yes, we have two calls, but our first caller is from Alberta, Canada.
Okay.
We will bring him on the air.
Oh, a guy. How super.
Caller, you are on the air with Johanna Carroll. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thanks very much for letting me be part of the show. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask your first name, if you don't mind sharing?
Sure, it's Jay calling from Canada.
Hi, Jay. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. So, do you feel, relative to what we've been chatting about, do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I find that myself, when you do the work and, work with your divine feminine side, I mean, it changes the whole aspect of, friendships, way you view the world and things like that. One of the aspects for me is like most of my friends now that I have are actually very intuitive or psychic, have abilities, and are mostly female. I think what guys do when they get into metaphysics, they still see it as a game in a way. It's like a toy that you can play around with all the time. Well, not all the time, but just like that. And I find sometimes that they're just dabbling in it instead of like picking one route and actually working with it. I find also the guys deal with things on a different level when it comes to metaphysical aspects of themselves, actually, too. Still stuck in that don't disturb the masculine. And that's
I think there is sort of that idea, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm not going to be a guy, kind of anymore. But the reality is, a lot of my male clients, they may not use the same language as women, but it's still the same concept. So in other words, a woman might say, I'm getting an intuitive hit, and a guy might say, hey, I got a gut feeling. To me, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So do you think there's a different, if men and women are using different language, can they still understand that they're still on the same journey together?
Yeah, I find also that they're using different, you've got to bring up a good point there, a different language, but also a different way of perceiving things too, metaphysically.
When you started on your journey, did you find yourself leaving old friendships behind and gathering new friendships that were more in alignment, or did everybody stay the same?
No, I had some friends when I first started my journey. That was way back then, in 2003, and I had some friends that were, I don't know, they're just friends, and and they're in their own place. I still have a good friend who's been known for 30 years, and I just accept him the way he is. When it comes to my spiritual friends, also it's a revolving door, basically. I mean, they're like one poem said, it's like they're here for a reason, season, or a lifetime. So,
right.
And as you evolve, that door, I think, the open door for other people to come into your lives becomes, how would you say it? The door gets closer and closer to closing in some sort of way too, because it's, I don't know, just a different vibration. Things you can talk about are a different, I don't want to say a different level, if you want to call that too.
Yeah, I think a lot of women say depth. From a female perspective, that's probably something that I hear a lot. But the reality is also, I think that when someone first starts, and I don't know if this is true for you, Jay, but when someone first starts on a spiritual path or quest or journey, whatever you'd like to call it, that it does become a very big focal point of their life. And so they are talking about it a lot, and they are sharing because they're on a quest, and they're looking for input, and they're looking for some kind of, emotional compatibility as far as other people that are doing that. And then after a while, maybe it's not, a daily part of your rhetoric. So, I can only speak for myself, but, I have friends that I feel are absolutely part of my spiritual community, and I feel very connected to them. And obviously, I have a whole spiritual family of, spiritual children out there. But then I have people that I play tennis with and, people that I'll go to dinner with, and it just doesn't even come up in the conversation. On some level, it's not necessary. On another level, it's a waste of energy. Does it mean that I love them any less? No, I do love them. I do find for myself lately, and maybe it's just because I'm getting older, I'm very selective who I do spend my time with. I don't want to be with fake people. I just finished writing an article on spiritual authenticity that we published on Facebook. So is that important to you, Jay? Do you have to be only with people who are on the same path as you?
On a spiritual path, yes, because you can talk about, let's say your friends that you go out with. Just said something about that. It's very interesting. The friends that you go out with, do you play tennis with? Do you ever have actually coffee with them? And what are the subjects that you talk about? Because you talk with metaphysical people or spiritual people, we're interacting. We're saying, this is what, they're trying to improve themselves and improve other people, or not improve. You can't really improve other people, but we're sharing ideas for the common good, right?
Right.
Whereas when I talk to other people that are just, I don't know, called Walking Dead, if you want to call them that, the sheeple or something like that. They can talk about, it talks about non-stuff that doesn't matter. We've been trained to be thinking that this really matters, but it isn't. It just that's how I look at it. And you know what? Also, getting into this, the men and women, I've noticed if one person in that relationship, whether man or woman, is on that spiritual journey, I find that there's kind of a little bit of tension in sort of the relationship, that the other side doesn't understand what you're doing, even though it's in a maybe different language, but they'll tolerate it or accept it, or they just won't, or ignore it in some sort of way because they're in that relationship. It's like, oh yeah, that's what they do, and that's okay. But the thing is that it kind of like divides the relationship in some sort of way that you cannot share. If I saw like angels, or I talked to angels, or something like that, or something that's spiritual. Let's say, let's talk about gratitude and what that really means when we sit down to supper or something like that. And I see how that can cause a little bit of friction in there too. So I think you can you can be in the relationship, yet also be spiritually lonely too, in some sort of way, unless you go outside of that and go be with friends and things like that too. So I just find there's
saying that you use that phrase, being spiritually lonely. I hear that a lot. Obviously there's a difference between being alone. I don't think any of us, if we're awake and aware and not in a soul sleep, are ever alone. We have the whole universe to connect with. But you can, even with that, be on a path on the earth, and it may not be a place you really are comfortable with, really talking about that. So going back to your comment, I'll just tell you, with my tennis friends, these women have known me a long time. They know what I do. They kind of look at me like I'm a little strange. However, when they've got something that is profound going on, they will talk to me about it. So, and some of them actually, oddly enough, shockingly enough, have called me for, a private session, giving spiritual counseling. And I'm very open about what I do. And not that I make a joke out of it, but sometimes I'll say, well, in my woo-woo world, but see, here's the thing. I don't want to separate my woo-woo world from my normal world, and that's what I'm hearing you say. It's very much part of who I am, and I don't go around apologizing for it. This is who I am. This is what I do. People kind of look at me, and I'm going to tell you where that really happened was in Sedona, of all places, spiritual pilgrimage site. But the reality is this, that I think we're all seeking our own community of unity, and so that does have a spirit and a metaphysical component. And it's like when you meditate or you pray with a group of people, or you do vision work with a group of people, or you go on a retreat with a group of people like I do, something magical really happens in your own chemistry of the soul. It really, really does. Well, Jay, I want to really thank you for calling, and blessings on your journey. We do have someone else, and it's really nice to know that the next caller is a man as well. So, Jay, enjoy the day. Thank you so much for calling. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Bye.
Great call. Thank you, Jay.
Okay, Gary, let's bring on our next guy, and then after that I think we'll take a little break. By the way, anybody that's listening, if you'd like to call in, our number is 646-478-3549. We'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings on Metaphysics and Men. So our next caller.
Yeah, he is from Charlotte, North Carolina, or the Charlotte, North Carolina area. And I have to say, I really appreciate the guys who are really showing up in force. So let's bring the caller on. Thank you for listening. Caller, you're on the air with Johanna.
Hi, Johanna. This is Joel McPhee calling.
Oh, Joel. Hi. How are you, Joel McPhee?
Yeah, I'm great.
Joel and I had shared some really interesting conversations together. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it. So here we are talking about metaphysics and men, and I know you're out in the world of business and that, corporate sort of world, and yet you've taken lots of leap of faith for yourself. So do you mind sharing your own thoughts on metaphysics and men, and for you personally, how it drove you?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to connect the dots with some of the dialogue that's occurred earlier. I think from a male perspective, when it comes to metaphysics, tapping into the more feminine, or I would say the intuitive side, for me was a matter of going through certain things and having to reach deeper within the emotional bag or spiritual bag to as a part of the process. So I think I've always been that way. I've always been intuitive and been tied in, but the experiences I think has enabled me to tap into the metaphysical space. And I think for most men, from a male perspective, it's challenging to move into that space, because in our system of thinking, our culture of thinking, it is somewhat viewed as a weakness, or a sense of, it's feminine, it's touchy-feely, it's not hard. So So I think it's challenging in the sense that, even in male relationships, and I think the caller talked about this from Canada, or was the gentleman before that, when in dealing with male relationships, especially in the spiritual space, it's very difficult for me. I find it very difficult to connect with males who may be in the spiritual space because there just seems there's a male type mentality, ego type behaviors playing out on another level between us.
What does that look like, though?
It's just it's competitive.
Mm-hmm.
It feels competitive. It feels standoffish, and it's about. I think it's about. I don't know if it's territorial. I don't know what but it feels very competitive, very standoffish. Whereas with women, I find that there are no guards, no barriers, no obstacles when it comes to intimacy. And when I say intimacy, I'm speaking of emotional intimacy, spiritual intimacy.
Right.
So, So from that's a part of my experience.
So does that make you more? I love that word, by the way, spiritual intimacy. Does that make you more comfortable around women, or having these conversations? I mean, so it's really interesting. I'm sort of taking notes while you're speaking. When it feels competitive, for me, that's a very territorial, is very primal energy that comes from fear. So how can you be spiritual and be living out fear at the same time? They sort of don't go hand in hand.
Yeah, it feels very it feels very primal. So males that I've encountered in whether it be spiritual groups or spiritual type sessions, it's just very standoffish. It's very it's not as the emotional spiritual intimacy is not there, and it just intuitively it just feels very fear based, like you mentioned. To your point about with the women, it's a natural. I don't know if there's a natural disarming. There's a natural openness about it, and even on a ongoing relationship. To continue a relationship, to build a relationship, there's just more of a natural or a natural feel to it, a natural cadence to it.
I think women are very comfortable talking about their feelings, sometimes a little too much,
Right.
And for men, I mean, the sacredness of it is private, and it is personal. And, a lot of men that I know, they don't have huge circles of, women, they have their big circles and they go to lunch or, in history they used to go down to the river and wash their clothes, or they would, quilt together, that kind of thing. Men don't really have that. Men come together in a competitive environment, whether it's a work environment or even a sports environment. So most of the men that I know, they maybe have one or two really good buddies, but they don't have like groups of people. Now, that being said, and I'm sure Jay would support this, there are a lot of male groups that are getting together, and they are going out and they're doing drumming ceremonies and they're doing stuff like that. That's not the norm, though. So how do we take this language of metaphysics that seems to have like this feminine, warmth to it, and how do men integrate that into their life without feeling that they've got to be really so territorial? Or, I don't know, private territorial, I'm not sure it's one and the same thing,
It's interesting because although you have, and I may have arm's length relationships with some men who are in the spiritual community, I do have male friendships or associations with men who are very intuitive, but they won't talk about their experiences and their philosophies, attitudes, belief systems in a spiritual sense, although it is cloaked in spirituality. So their opinions about what's happening around the world, what's happening in this country with regards to race, gender, etc., the environment, It is very spiritual, but they themselves would not talk about it or describe themselves in that context.
So is the labeling and the language really that important? I mean, there's an underlying connection energetically.
Right.
Have, he's spiritual, he's not spiritual. She's spiritual.
Exactly.
I don't like that. For me, I don't like that,
Right.
It's like, some of my friends that, have not literally studied metaphysics, but they're the kindest, loving people on this earth. So to me, they really they are part of my spiritual family. We just, language-wise, it's a different kind of conversation. When I'm leading a retreat with people now, they're really in it. They're there specifically for that. And so maybe they go out into the world. To me, it's kind of like what Gary was saying before and what my husband was saying. You got to live it at your core. So maybe do women care more about what people think than men do? I don't know. I mean, I think it's really interesting. I do think that there is a beautiful wave of light that is carrying men and women to the same destination. And I think we both need to be okay that we're going to do it differently. So what I'm hearing you say is I'm honoring my male friends. They may not call themselves spiritual.
Right.
In my eyes they are.
They are, right. And there's one more thing I wanted to comment on. I think it's regarding to the comment you made about the spiritual teacher who didn't leave tips, and the concept of I think the conversation was around if you are a teacher, if you're called to teach, living what you preach. And the only comment I would say is I believe as a teacher, yes, you must live and act out what you teach and believe and espouse. However, I think we're human, and I believe that oftentimes we all have blind spots, and I think sometimes if we call certain things to people's attention, they may respond or not. But I think we have to give ourselves some level of we have to be easy on ourselves sometimes, because just because you're a teacher doesn't make you perfect. And I don't want to excuse the behavior. All I'm saying is there should be room for the fact that we're human.
Yeah, as you were speaking, I wrote down, allow the imperfections. As you well know, Joel, if we were perfect, we wouldn't need to be here on the earth living life, through the great classroom of the universe, and also I think we need to give ourselves a break. I was just on this 2-week program in Malta, and it was tiring, and 3 of the women came up to me one night, and they were going to do this special ceremony, and I said, I have to be really honest with you. I am so exhausted. I really need to get some sleep. And I said, but I will be with you in my dreams and in my spirit. Now, 10 years ago, I probably would have said, no, I need to be there, But you know what? That's the other thing. It's allowing the imperfection of someone else and giving ourselves a break. And when we do have a need, being okay, to me is my favorite saying, it's all in the delivery system. It's all how you ask and what you receive back. So, well, I want to thank you for calling, Joel. And, I've been watching you and your journeys and your book and all of that. So, good luck with everything. Thank you so much for calling. I really, really appreciate you taking the time. Very sweet of you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to take a little break. And again, our topic today is Metaphysics and Men. Very blessed that we've had a few men call in already. If you would like to add to the conversation or the dialogue, please call in at 646-478-3549. And Gary is going to take us on a little break. We'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Johanna. I'm very excited about a 2-day retreat that I'm going to be doing October 24 and 25 at a wonderful little seaside town in California called Carlsbad by the Sea. The name of my retreat program is called Listen, and it's really about listening to your soul song. The intention is it's going to guide you in igniting the carrier wave of creation and fulfillment, development of your intuitive self. We're going to be doing some channeling with the Ascended Masters of Illumination and Mary Magdalene. And a new thing that I've developed called journal surfing. It's a lot of fun. So we are going to be doing this at Tamarack Beach Resort in Carlsbad by the Sea in California. It's a 2-day program. It's a wonderful little village for you to wander and just have a wonderful little mini vacation for yourself. All the information is on my website, and the hotel graciously is giving everyone who attends a wonderful discount on your room, which, by the way, is right across the street from a wonderful beach. So join me October 24 and 25 in Carlsbad by the Sea for my 2-day retreat called Listen.
We also urge you to join Johanna for her monthly live broadcast, which airs every third or fourth Saturday at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on our Blog Talk Radio page at www.blogtalkradio.com/CLN. You could also catch the best of Dialogue with Divinity on our main website at clnradio.com on the Community Listening Network.
And in regards to those shows, the best of Johanna Carol, her shows from 2008 to 2010, 2010, you can catch that every day on our live stream at www.clnradio.com, and that begins at 9 a.m. on Sunday and 9 p.m. 9 a.m., 3 p.m., and also at 9 p.m. on Sunday. And then it airs every Monday through Friday, the best of Dialogue with Divinity, at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And the same goes for Saturday. Now, you can also catch rebroadcasts of our live shows. Yes, we do re-air some of these shows on our live stream, going all the way back to the beginning when we started over a year ago, Johanna. And that airs on Sundays beginning at 12 noon. And then every day, Monday through Friday, beginning at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. So you can get your good dose of Dialogue with Divinity, past and present. And then you can continue to listen to us in the future. And now back to our host.
Wow. Thank you, Gary. You know, I do want to talk for a minute about the retreats that I do. They're not just for women. We just did a program in Malta, and that really was a goddess retreat. But I had a lot of guys coming up to me and saying, well, what about the gods? You know, don't the gods get to go with the goddesses? So we will be going back to Malta in 2017, men and women. And, you know, the little programs that I do, the retreats that I do on the weekends, the 2-day programs, it really is a great, you know, if you are a couple, and particularly this program called Listen in October, and you really want, you know, we talked about language before between men and women, really respecting the language of each other, you know, and really trying to figure it out at the same time on a spiritual path or a path that works for you. You know, this is a great opportunity. And I also want to say that my last retreat in Malta was very inspirational for me because it really prompted me to get out there and do a lot more. So I've been posting new articles, spiritual articles on my website, johannacarol.com. And also I'm going to be doing a 5-day retreat in September of 2016 in Maui. And we're going to have a lot of fun. And so please, men and women, even if you're single, not single, doesn't matter what kind of relationship you are or not in, just please join us. So, you know, I was looking through some of my paperwork before we started the show today, and, you know, we talk about fear a lot. So I saw this article, fear has 2 meanings, forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. So the choice is yours. So I believe we have Allison, my favorite guest, in the queue. Yes. So we're going to bring her on and get the female perspective on metaphysics and men. I'd love to hear what she has to say. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Johanna. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for calling.
Yeah, no, a great. It's been a great show. I've loved hearing what both Jay and Joel have said. Really interesting perspectives. I kind of just wanted to add on to some of the stuff that they said. I had just two quick comments and a question for you both. And one of them is, I think that, you talked about men having these friends, right, and what kind of friendships they have. And I will tell you, my own experience has been men probably have some of the deepest friendships they have with women. And I know this because I have a number of really deep and very profound friendships with men who will kind of open up in ways that, they might not necessarily feel safe to with other guys because they feel like they'll be mocked, right? So both Jay and Joel kind of mentioned, you have to kind of pick your people who you're going to be safe with. And for a lot of times, that's women. And then I think women also play an important role, whether you're in a relationship, in an intimate relationship with a man or not. I think a lot of men learn from their sisters, their mothers, right, their cousins. I mean, the women who are in their lives and who get to model that and really provide that safe harbor. So I think for all the women who are doing their spiritual work, there is spillover effect, and we should celebrate that.
There's also a little bit of, I'm going to sort of play devil's advocate for a minute, and I know you're in corporate America, and of course I was in corporate America for a long time. That can be challenging for men and women that are on a spiritual path, because sometimes you think you're the only, player on the field.
Right.
So, I mean, how do you work through that? I think there's a sense like I shouldn't be here, I should be doing something else, but I really do feel that on some karmic level, we've signed up to be in corporate America to shift the consciousness, but it's not easy.
No, exactly. It's not. And I think this is a time where we are all becoming our own teachers, and we have to kind of lead that for ourselves, right, to really be that model so that you recognize that you're there to help model it for others. And we forget that sometimes, that we're there to kind of reflect that back, which actually was going to be a part of my second point, which was, what Oprah has done for women has been tremendous, because she has very much of a clarion call where she asks women to live their best lives. Men don't have a model like that. And while there's certainly religious leaders like Joel Osteen or Rick Warren, those are religious leaders. And, religion and spirituality aren't necessarily the same thing. Sure. So I think there's really time, for all the men who are listening to this program or who are thinking, where is that? If you feel the rise and the call yourself, I think men themselves need their own leader as well.
So it's really interesting that we keep using this word rise, and not that I'm self-promoting, but I actually am self-promoting. I am doing this program in Maui next year, and it's called Rise. And it's all about activating that essence of spiritual elegance that lives within each of us, and then how you take it out into the world on a personal and a professional level. And that's the dichotomy. It's a challenge because, I can only live it at home or on the weekend, and here I am in the corporate world, and I feel like I'm, on a desert, and I'm all by myself, So you're in corporate America. I mean, what do you do? I mean, I'll tell you what I used to do. I used to go into the ladies' room and close the stall door and take some breaths, recenter myself, say a prayer so I could go back out there and do the drill. But what are you doing? I've worked in an environment that's really been intense, and I think for me, what I do is reframe the challenge into this gives me an opportunity to really practice what I believe in my core, right? So you can be if you are. If you call yourself spiritual and then, in the outside world, you are taking advantage of people and acting in ways that are incongruent to that, then you have to kind of look at the dichotomy between that, and the gap between that is large. The real trick, right, is taking those values and beliefs and living it. And I think for myself at least, when I'm faced with really difficult situations, I think to myself, how does my highest and best self want to approach this? And then I think of what's my first instinct on how to do it? And even within myself, I recognize sometimes there's a dichotomy, and I need to close that gap. So I look at these challenges now, and actually after going to Malta, this really helped me, with the lens of this is an opportunity for me to practice what I really believe. And this is PhD level of practice, right? If it was easy, we wouldn't have to be here. So that's the other piece, which actually leads me to the question I was going to ask both of you. You're talking about spirituality in men.
what do you think is the vision for the endpoint? If a man is engaged spiritually and he is a spiritual person, what does that look like, feel like? Like, what should men be aiming for?
That's a good question. Gary, seeing you're the male person here, I'm going to let you answer that first.
What guys should really aim for in regards to metaphysics, spirituality, and everything is to, and Jay touched on this. That's why it's, one of the many things he shared was such a great call.
Great call.
Is the ego factor, and so that's really, to me, for men, that's what guys should really, knowing how to deal with and control and their egos, because it's because of that, from a guy standpoint, that causes us to miss it. Because egos goes into so many other things, narcissism and selfishness and all the other things that come along with it. So what I've learned is I've used, and I actually used this from another metaphysical teacher who happened to be a guy, but I use different phrases and different words as like power words, or really like wake up, phrases to kind of snap me back. And one of them is, don't let ego come into play.
So it's like you're doing your own call to action on some level,
yeah,
right?
It's like a shock word. It's like a conditioned word, like a trigger word, and I use it a lot. And whenever I get to that point and I'm getting to that brink, I always remember, don't let ego come into play, baby. And I say it in kind of a way, kind of a slang way, because it makes it kind of juicy, kind of fresh, but it causes that reaction in me to begin to contemplate and to really think on a level plane and to realize that ego's going to mess you up.
Well, the thing of it is, it goes back to, again, we started talking with Jay about this and with Joel. It's about language. So, for those of you that are listening, here's some real simple 3 little things. And then I'm going to give you the metaphysical teaching around it. Because, we have conversation, sound, first law of action and creation goes out there. But there's a lot going on with, metaphysically in the quantum field. So stop, look, listen. That really is the first step. When someone is going on the first step to understanding their own spiritual journey, which is the dance of awareness, they've got to stop. What does that really mean? Step back. Just step back. Stop what you're doing. We have these emotional knee-jerk reactions. We're very reactionary as a global consciousness. The minute you stop, you flip the switch to the first step of awareness. Now, the second part of that is look, review. What's really going on here? How do I feel about this? It's not psychoanalytical. When you get in touch with your feelings, you get in touch with your soul. Right. I always say that the heart is the pillow for the soul. So stop, look, listen is become aware, step back, review, and, listen, my favorite word right now, listen. It's when you listen to the song of your own soul, there is a renewal. There's a renewal that happens. And so when you stop, look, listen, you step back, you review, and you have a renewal, you present yourself out into the world. There's been a shift, whether you call it a paradigm shift, a consciousness shift, or just a moment to take a breath. And now all of a sudden you're in a situation. There's a conversation with a person. Instead of being confrontational and coming from fear, you're coming from self-love. And now you're talking to that person like you're talking to your favorite grandmother. So what does it do? We say if you want the world to change, you got to be, the first agent of change for yourself. So for those of you that are listening, listen, stop, look, listen. Just doing that, you're at the traffic light of life. The light just turned red. Stop. So you can't go anywhere, so you might as well just, take a breath, become more aware, look, review where you are. It's not safe for you to move forward right now. It's not wise. Listen, is there anything that's, it's very metaphorical and oncoming that you need to be aware of. Renew your perspective. Put your spiritual glasses on. Go out into the world with more love in your heart. It sounds very woo-woo, but you know what? It's not. That's the very first thing that anyone can do. And so I don't care if it's a man or a woman that's, listening right now. Stop, look, listen, step back, review, renew, and go out into the world a new soul, Whether you want to call yourself a new man, a new woman, a new attitude, it doesn't matter. But I really feel that we are walking into a time, we have an opportunity to walk into a time of incredible, what I call spiritual elegance. What does that really mean? The path you are laying before you is an energy field, and that's what people are going to recognize. They're going to cut through all that other stuff and energetically, and you're not going to connect with everyone. And I think that, is a lot what, not just what Jay was saying, what Joel was saying, and what Allison is saying, and what you and I, Gary, are saying, is there's a hesitancy. We all want to be with people that we feel loved by, that we feel honored, respected, and cherished. It's not going to happen every day, but we're definitely in this shift. Even in the corporate world, there is a corporate consciousness of that spirit of cooperation. It is out there. And even within a corporate environment that can be chaotic, even if it's with one or two people. The World Bank, a very good friend of mine, Richard Barrett, this is probably 25 years ago, every lunchtime at the World Bank, he started a spiritual brown bag lunch. And people, first it was one or two, and then all of a sudden it was 20, 30 people. They brought their lunch in a brown bag, and they sat around and they started to talk about spirituality. That happened 25 years ago, so it is there. You got to go find it. Stop, review, is there a community or a friend that I need to connect with, that I haven't touched on in a long time. It's from a soulful living perspective, it's your decision. So, Allison, do you have anything more to add or another question?
No, that's it. But thank you, guys. Fascinating conversation.
Thank you, as always, Allison. We love your phone calls.
Thanks, guys.
Have a favorite goddess girl. So, Gary, I think, it's time, unless we have another caller on the line, I think maybe it might be time to say goodbye to everyone with this very interesting subject. And I really hope that those of you that are listening will share this with your friends, or if you're having a challenge, with someone in your life, or maybe a man that you'd like him to, put his spiritual glasses on and look at this differently, have him listen to what these guys have to say. I think it has a tremendous amount of value. So, Gary, we are at the end of another great show.
Yes,
and,
we are clear.
Again, what's new is that we've got some new articles on my website. We've got a 2-day retreat in Carlsbad, which is Southern California, in October, which is probably the most beautiful time. All the tourists have gone home. Carlsbad is this cute little village. The class is, it's like 4 hours a day. So you get to go out and play and have fun. And anyone that wants more information, all of this is on my website, johannacarroll.com. And as always, from my soul to yours, I thank you for taking your time to connect with your own spirit, and I wish you a beautiful day along the way.